Next, from Springfield, Governor Rauner speaks of the Illinois Chamber of Commerce Employer Action Day and discusses his legislative agenda to create jobs and improve Illinois' business climate. This runs about 30 minutes.
Thank you for being business builders in Illinois. Thank you. Your success is Illinois' success, and it's a privilege for me to work for you. I'm your strongest advocate. I'm all in 100%. Your success is the key to Illinois' prosperity and the key to our future. So I'm here to talk about what's going on in Springfield, how we're trying to advocate for you to try to make you more competitive so you can grow your businesses and create more prosperity for everyone in Illinois. That's the whole key. You know, people think in Illinois we're really fighting about a budget. They think it's about a budget. It's only a little piece of it. What it really is about is the future of Illinois. That's what we're fighting about. And the core question is, are we going to stay on the trajectory that we've been on for decades? Very low economic growth, high taxes, deficit spending, unfunded pensions, a lot of job losses, lower family incomes, decline, slow, gradual decline, or are we going to go in a new direction? Growth, more jobs, higher incomes, truly balanced budgets, more education funding, more competitiveness. Are we going to go in a positive direction or stay on the long, slow road of decline that we've been on forever? You know, people say in the General Assembly, the Democrats have said to me, Governor, stop talking about reforms, stop talking about being pro-business, just focus on a budget. Talk about other stuff. I say, wait a minute, guys, this is not other stuff. Growth is the budget. Being pro-growth solves the budget crisis. I can't seem to get it through. They just don't get it, or they refuse to acknowledge it. Simple fact, if we had just grown at the nation's average, and by the way, we should be way above average in our growth because we got the hardest working people in America, best location of any state in America, best agriculture of any state in America. We've had a lot of the best infrastructure, although we've let it start to rot away. But we have every advantage strategically. We should be one of the fastest growing states in America. We've got every reason to be one of the fastest growing. But let's just say we grew at the nation's average the last 15 years, just average. You know what? Today we would not have a budget deficit at all. We would not have any unpaid bills at all. And by the way, we have $8 billion of unpaid bills that you're paying 12% interest on, which is appalling. We would not have needed the 2011 tax hike at all. We would not have had to change our tax rates up at all. And today, in our state treasury, we would have $19 billion more in cash to fund our human services, to fund our schools, and to give you guys a tax rebate, like they're doing in Indiana and a lot of other states. Think about that. Purely from average growth. We have got to grow. Number one priority, economic growth. That's you. That's your businesses. You are the key to making that happen. That's why we've got to make you more competitive, and that's why we're fighting so hard for pro-business, pro-growth reforms. People in Illinois like to say, well, we're a state that protects employees. We advocate for employees. Well, you can't advocate for employees if you're not also going to advocate for employers. Because if employers aren't being helped with the environment to be competitive, we don't have employees to advocate for. We have got to be employer as well as employee. We need a balance in this state. And that's what this fight is about, restoring balance so we can increase our prosperity. So we're advocating for 4 types of reforms. And meanwhile, the Democrats are saying no reforms, just focus on, quote, budget, meaning when they say that, what they mean is, Governor, support a tax hike. That's what they mean. They don't ever want to really say that directly. I think I just lost my, I think the battery's out. Oh, no, there it goes. The speaker did say in December he wants the income tax to go back up, but mostly the Democrats are avoiding saying what they really want is to force a big tax hike. When they say focus on the budget, that's what they mean. They just don't, that's code. So we've got to understand what the fight's about. And let me be clear, I can never and will never support a tax hike without significant reforms. Just won't do it. Just cannot do it. It would be a huge error, massive mistake for the people of Illinois to put in a massive tax hike and no reforms. I won't do it. End of story. Period. Won't do it. Now, I'm willing to compromise on what reforms we have. I'm willing to work with the General Assembly to find bipartisan compromise, but we need significant reforms. Have to have it. We're pushing for 4 types of reforms: political reform, state government reform, local government reform, and business reforms. 4 types of reforms. We don't have to even get a reform in every category, but we need some reforms. On the political side, you guys know, to restore confidence in our government, confidence of our employers, confidence from our working families, I want to make sure our democracy is working for our people again. And so I'm advocating for 2 things: term limits on elected officials in the government so they don't stay in any one office too long, and fair maps. We have redistricting reform so we can have competitive general elections instead of these jerry-rigged districts where you can't actually have a competitive general election. And every incumbent is locked into power for decades. Those are 2 things I'm advocating. Need to have them. Term limits, we've learned we can't get through the voter referendum process. Tried that, got the signatures, but the court threw it out and said the only way you can get term limits is if the General Assembly votes for it. So it's a little bit of a challenge. But we're going to keep pushing. We're going to keep pushing. We're not going to never give up on that. That's really important, good government reform. And by the way, for the folks who don't agree with term limits, fine, but let the people decide. Let the people decide. Give the people of Illinois a choice. But they don't want to give the choice because the 75% of Democrats and 85% of Republicans support term limits. This is a bipartisan reform. So on redistricting reform, we can actually have that done through a voter referendum, and you guys should support that because there's folks out collecting signatures right now. But I'm trying to get the legislature to support it. It's good government reform, and the odds of getting the Democrats suing and winning in court go down if the legislature's voted on it. So I'm trying to get the legislature to vote for it. And by the way, Democratic voters in Illinois support redistricting and fair maps just like Republican voters do. Bipartisan reform. Now, the second type of reform is state government. We need reforms in our government. The waste, the inefficiency in our government is stunning. We need procurement reform. Could save you $500 million. We need pension reform, whether it's President Cullerton's plan, which could save $1 billion, my plan that could save $2.3 billion, whichever. We need pension reform. We need to start that process right now. We also need bargaining reform so we can start paying our employees more, but based on productivity and taxpayer savings, not just seniority. And we need to have competitive ability to contract out services and change the way work is provided within our state government to drive more productivity and effectiveness. Those are huge reforms inside state government. Local government, big reforms we're pushing. Consolidation, you guys know we have 7,000 units of government. 7,000. 2,000 more units of government than the number 2 state. And double the average state. And most of those units of government have pensions, patronage, cronyism, high salaries, insider deals. How about we get rid of that? Shrink it down. Huge bipartisan support for that. We've got reforms, and get rid of the unfunded mandates. We have hundreds and hundreds of unfunded mandates restricting our schools, our teachers, our city governments, our county governments, our school districts. We need to get rid of mandates, get rid of the governments, and then get a real control on our property taxes by getting you local control of bargaining, bidding, contracting at the local level. You run your communities how you want. And for those communities that are run by Democrats who have a very strong bias towards having strong government unions, fine. They can keep it. I'm not saying take away anybody's collective bargaining at all. And the Democratic towns who want to keep strong government unions, keep it. Bargain everything. I'm not saying you got to take it away, but every community should decide for itself how it wants to do its contracting on government projects, how it wants to do its bidding process, how it wants to do its collective bargaining. Because it's your community. It doesn't belong to Springfield. It doesn't belong to anybody else. It doesn't belong to government union leaders. It belongs to you, the people of Illinois. We need local control of these issues. And over time, we can save billions and billions of dollars and get real property tax relief. And then for business, we need a dramatic change. We're always ranked among the bottom states in terms of attractiveness for business. We are always in the bottom 5. Why? There's no reason for it. We need to change our labor regulations. We need to change our workers' comp regulation. I mean, our workers' comp is abusive. It's full of abuse. And it's the #1 regulatory change that we need to keep businesses from leaving the state. I can't tell you how many dozens and dozens of companies have told me they're leaving the state because of workers' comp. It's the #1 regulatory problem that we got to fix. And this is bipartisan. Even our Attorney General, who last I checked was not a Republican, even our Attorney General has said we need causation in our workers' comp system. We need causation in our workers' comp system. We also need a new battery, I think. Workers' comp, tort reform. We have several of the most abusive districts in America for lawsuit, and our liability costs, our insurance costs, very high, and it's pushing a lot of employers out of the state. And we need we need a balance between the tort bar, the plaintiff's bar, and the employers of this state. We need a balance. We don't need to be one, everybody deserves their day in court if they have a legitimate beef, but our system is rigged against businesses. It's rigged against employers, and we got to get some balance there. And there's bipartisan support for that. These are changes. Every reform that we're advocating has bipartisan support. There's not a single change that we're recommending that is only supported by one political party or one type of voter. But so far, the General Assembly, the Democrats under the Speaker, have refused to vote on any of it. And I'll tell you what's going on right now. The General Assembly, the Democrats in the majority, are working very aggressively to try to force a big tax hike with no reforms. They are working really hard right now. They're holding hostage MAP grants, they're holding hostage social services funding, and they're holding hostage our university funding. Right now, the Republicans have introduced bills to pay for those and keep them functioning without requiring a tax hike. We could fund our MAP grants with procurement reform. That's $500 million. That's more than we need for MAP grants. Right there, we could fund MAP grants, no tax hike needed for that. Right today, we could fund our social services with $1 billion in President Cullerton's pension reform plan. Right now, we could pay $1 billion to keep Catholic Charities and Lutheran Charities and a number of our social service agencies functioning through this budget impasse. They won't call the bill. They want the crisis. They want to hold it hostage. We could fund Eastern Illinois University, Chicago State, right today if we used excess money in some of our special purpose funds and devoted it on it's not a long-term answer, but short-term, those schools would not have to close and suffer during this budget impasse. We could use that money today, hundreds of millions of dollars. And nobody on the special purpose side would be hurt by it because it's excess, and we could keep the schools open. Democrats don't want that. They want to hold the schools hostage to force a crisis, to force a tax hike. And I'm also hearing that our Attorney General is planning to go to court in the next couple of weeks to try to force the end of payments to our state employees, to try to force a government shutdown, to force a tax hike. They're going to try to use the latest Supreme Court rulings about appropriations trumping contracts to say state employees should not be paid anymore, even though they're working. And by the way, the legislature made sure they always get continuing appropriations. The legislature always gets paid. State employees, though, no, they don't want them paid. The Attorney General is going to try to cut off the pay to the state workers, to try to force a crisis, force a shutdown of the government, to try to force a tax hike. That's going on right now. And President Cullerton, head of the Democrats in the Senate, has come out publicly and said he doesn't want to support school funding this year. He wants schools not to open this year unless the formula changes and Chicago gets at least $300 million more so Chicago schools can get a big bailout. Let me be clear, that is wrong. That is baloney. That should never happen. They're trying to create a crisis on the school funding, try to create a crisis so our public schools don't open to force a tax hike. And I've said I'm open to changing the school funding formula, which the Democrats, last time it was updated, the Democrats had complete control of everything about the formula. They last updated it in 2003. Democratic governor, complete Democratic control of the legislature. They last updated the school funding formula. I didn't create it. I've never liked it, and I'm willing to change it, but they've been fighting about changing it for years. They don't do it. And what we can't do this year, all of a sudden this year is the crisis year. Because they want to force a tax hike. They're making it a crisis year because they want to force a tax hike. Otherwise, it's be the same thing that's been going on for years. We've had a broken school funding formula that they created. I've said I'm up for changing it, but what we should never do is hold our schools opening as a hostage. But that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to say crisis that they created. Tax hike. We got to do a tax hike. We don't have any choice. Wrong. That is wrong. We can't let it happen. You need your help to get that message out there. Now, while this battle is going on, and believe me, it's hand-to-hand combat every day. It's hard to run a government without a budget. It's really hard. But we're trying to, the best we can, not to let them force, the Democrats force a big tax hike. So we're transforming government. We've already cut more than $700 million out of the operating costs of government, just from administrative action. We've got superstar directors of all our state agencies. We're modernizing our IT system. I don't know if you guys know this. We have 280 financial reporting systems. Every state department has its own IT department. They don't talk to each other. We're running IT programs, software from 1974. Yeah, don't laugh. I mean, that was a great year. That was the year I got out of high school. That was a great year. But you know, software's changed a little bit in the last, 50 years. And we can do better. And because of the way we've done IT, which is broken just like most everything else in government operations, we are the third highest spending state government in America for IT, and we're the bottom 5 states for digital services delivered. I bet you're not shocked by that, but that's true. And so we're changing that. I brought in a private executive from Cisco Systems, and he's transforming the IT operations, and we're going to modernize it. We're going to leapfrog the technology that other states have done, and we're going to use the private sector capability to do that. And I'm trying to use the private sector as a partner as much as possible in every part of the government. Our Department of Commerce is now, we've created a not-for-profit partnership. I hope you guys will consider, if you haven't already, maybe helping with that. It's not political, it's a not-for-profit, you get a tax deduction. But Jim Schultz, who is our head of DECIO, he's left, and he's now the CEO of that not-for-profit. We're going to try to use that entity to recruit the superstar business recruiters from around America, and frankly from around the world, to come into that department, into that not-for-profit, so we can pay them on incentive. If you're in state government, you can't be paid on incentive. It's not allowed. Well, in business, paying on incentive works. And we need people who can make a bonus if they bring in and we actually sign great new deals to recruit companies. And we want the best in America. Other smart states have already done it. They've already got not-for-profit partnerships with a business-controlled entity. We need to do that in Illinois. We're getting grief from the Democrats in the General Assembly who don't want us successful in recruiting companies, and they're attacking us for it. But it's the common sense, it's the right thing to do, and we're pushing it. And if you would support that new not-for-profit, we'd appreciate it. We're also trying to create a foundation for our fairgrounds. Our fairgrounds are very important to promoting agriculture and tourism in Illinois. Our fairgrounds are deteriorated like many things in our state government. So we want to create a foundation. Common sense. Every other state in the Midwest has done it. They have foundations for their fairgrounds. We could raise tens of millions of dollars from agriculture businesses around America who would love to donate money to fix up our fairgrounds and get a tax deduction for it. Other states have all done this. Great for taxpayers. Doesn't cost taxpayers a nickel, and we can have world-class fairgrounds. What do the Democrats want to do? Won't call the bill. We introduced it last year, they wouldn't call the bill. We've introduced it this year, they won't call the bill. No negative. It saves taxpayers tens of millions of dollars, and we can promote our fairgrounds. The Democrats in Madigan won't call the bill. Come on. It's actually stunning. Similarly, we're going to use the private sector to help build our roads. We've got a shortage. I want to do our much bigger, better investment in our infrastructure, our roads, bridges, locks, dams, canals, rail systems. The private sector can help. Right now, we got I-55 as a parking lot, and I take it a lot as I'm going back and forth from Chicago to Springfield. And we've got a plan right now to use the private sector, no taxpayer money, to build new lanes on I-55 that will have variable tolling. So when things are really crowded, a private contractor can charge, X $3 a car or whatever, to bypass all the delay. And then when things are quiet, the toll can go to 50 cents or zero, and it can just flex to solve the crisis of traffic jams during rush hour, and no taxpayer money involved, and a huge boon to the economic competitiveness of the metropolitan Chicago area. We're pushing it. We're being criticized by some people for it, but we're pushing it. The private sector can be a partner with the public sector, and I'm a big believer in public-private partnerships. So we're trying to get creative every way we can to solve these problems. Here's where I need your help. Somewhere in the coming months, things are going to come to a head. They're going to come to a head. And many of you are in districts that are represented by a Democratic senator or a Democratic representative. And I know I believe you had the Democratic head of the Senate here today. I don't know how much you asked him about what's going on, but you know what? The Republican caucus is very united in trying to be pro-growth. We're united in what the agenda should be. Many of the Democrats in private are supportive, never in public. They haven't called any of the reform bills. You need you, especially those of you who are located in a district that is represented by a Democratic senator or a Democratic representative, to call them, send an email, write a letter, show up at the office, and get some of your friends, your neighbors, your fellow business owners in the district to do that. The one thing I can say is the President of the Senate and the Speaker of the House do respond to pressure from their members. And their members respond to pressure within their districts. So we need your help. Get the pressure going. Get the message out. Every reform we're pushing is bipartisan. Everyone can help grow our economy. Everyone can help ensure long-term balanced budgets. Everyone can help promote higher income growth for the families of Illinois. And here's the tragic fact. I think most of you heard me say it before. We are suffering completely, unreasonably, unnecessarily in Illinois because of our hostility to growth. We have fewer jobs in Illinois today than we had 17 years ago. Think about that. And meanwhile, our pension obligations and our Medicaid spending and everything else has gone through the roof. And meanwhile, we got fewer jobs. And because we have fewer jobs, we have the average family in Illinois makes less money today than they made 17 years ago. Think about that. That's wrong. That is just, that's not what America's about. America is about growth, free enterprise, and rising incomes. People think that, well, you gotta, in order to get employees more incomes and higher incomes, you gotta have organizations or advocacy or regulations. No, you don't. You need economic growth. That's what gets people's incomes up. Rapid economic growth. Look at the state of Texas. People think that they're hostile to employees, or you know, they're too much pro-business and they're hostile to employees. You know what? Factory workers in Texas make more money than factory workers in Illinois. And we're supposed to be the pro-employee state. Come on. The reason they're making more money in Texas, they're growing, they're booming. We're not. And I'm a competitive son of a gun. And you know what? You know what? We get some of these regulations changed. You watch. I'm going to Texas. I'm going to Indiana. I'm going to Tennessee. I'm going to China. I'm going to Germany on my nickel. And we're going to bring companies to Illinois because they want to be here. With our people and our strategic location and our infrastructure, they want to come here. We had GE lined up. GE, that would have been a huge home run for the state of Illinois. GE was Illinois' first choice. But you know what? One of the folks said to me, Bruce, I can't. How do we move from one failed state to another? It's a good question. Connecticut, where they were located, looks exactly like Illinois. High incomes, great strategic location, diverse economy, go down the list. Looks a lot like Illinois. And a lot like Illinois, huge unfunded pensions, huge debt and deficits, huge lack of balance of power between taxpayers and government union leaders. All the same problems we got here. And Connecticut, to solve their budget problems every few years, raises their income tax. That's their answer to their problems, raise the income tax. And finally, GE said, you know what? We're sick of this. That is not the answer. Raising the income tax every couple of years to solve your pension, your debt, your deficit, that's not the answer. And they left. And they said, Governor, can you show that Illinois is not going to do the same baloney that Connecticut's just doing? I said, give me a few months and I think I can. Well, I couldn't. They finally said, I can't wait any longer. So they broke up, they're relocating people all over the country, with a lot of them going to Boston, which is not exactly a bastion of free market enterprise. But they've got Harvard and MIT, which is a huge issue. When I had GE pumped about the U of I and U of C, big time. They wanted the U of I and U of C, big time. But Connecticut's changed collective bargaining with government unions. They've changed workers' comp, so they're average. They're average. That's my goal. Let's be average on workers' comp. Let's be average on workers' comp. They've changed their system, so Boston and Massachusetts has done a lot of what and they're Democrats. Democrats have done this. Our Democrats can do this. They should do it, but instead, right now, they're fighting every way they can to force a big tax hike on you guys. Massive mistake. We've got to fight back on it. So that's what's going on. There's conversations going at levels up and down with the General Assembly and in and around. They've been going off and on now for months. We could have and should have had this done last spring. There's really no good reason. Really, really not. And I'm hoping, we just got to stay persistent and stay optimistic. You know I'm a volunteer. I'm doing this because I love Illinois, and I believe in our future. I believe if we can get the reforms that we're advocating, even a portion of them, not all of them, just a portion of them, I believe within 24 months we can see a fundamentally different trajectory for our economy, for our budgets, for our schools, and for our family incomes. I believe we can get a fundamentally different trajectory. Indiana saw it when Mitch Daniels turned around Indiana. Other, Michigan, Wisconsin, other states, Kentucky's starting to change. And the changes, the impacts come very quickly. It doesn't take 15 years to see the result of reforms. I think we can see it within 24 months. And that's what we're fighting to do. Change the trajectory. Getting the ultimate problem solved is going to be a long-term project. We got into this mess for decades. It's going to take decades to get out. But we can start solving the problems with structural reform. And I keep reminding the mayor in Chicago. The mayor right now has asked me to sign a pension kick-the-can bill for Chicago. He wants to defer pension payments. And I've said, look, here's a simple fact. Kicking the can on pension payments is bad policy, okay? It is basically borrowing from the pension funds at 8%. That's what that is. When you don't pay the actuarially required amount, you are borrowing from the pension fund at 8%. 8% is roughly what the long-term return on assets is in the pension. When you don't pay in the actuarial amount, you are borrowing at 8%. That is bad policy. And I've said I'll reluctantly go along with some bad policy. Last year I signed a bunch of bills that were bad, but I'm trying to find some bipartisan compromise. I'll buy off on some bad policy. Putting in an income tax hike, it would be bad policy. I've said I'll consider that, but only if there's structural reform to good policy for the long term. Need to have good policy if we're also going to swallow some bad policy, okay? This is politics. This is compromise. But if somebody thinks I should just sign off on bad policy alone, tax hike alone, or pension kick the can alone with no reforms, no way. There's no way. I'll take some bad policy, but only with good policy. That's crystal clear. We got into this mess by hiking taxes and kicking the can on pensions and being hostile to business. That's what got us in this mess. And they keep pushing the same ideas. Chicago keeps jacking up their taxes and kicking the can on pensions. Come on. Wake up. Let's deal with reality. Let's get reforms and begin to really structurally grow and kick some tails. Chicago should be booming. Instead, people are leaving. Illinois should be booming. Instead, jobs are leaving. Illinois should be thriving. Instead, families' incomes are down. We can get this, ladies and gentlemen. We can do it. But we've got to stay persistent. We've got to stay strong. We've got to be true to our values. America was built on free enterprise. America was built on freedom and competition and being competitive. And I want us to be compassionate. It drives me nuts that we're not funding a lot of our human services. But we can't afford to be compassionate if we're not competitive. We've got to be competitive so we can afford to be compassionate. And that's what this fight's all about. So we're going to stay strong, need your support. Big battle. This is a critical year. We're going to stay strong. It's hand-to-hand combat every day. But we need your support because in the long run, we got to stay persistent, stay true to our principles of freedom and opportunity and growth. We've got to be the state of growth, and our other problems will be dealt with if we become a growth state. Thank you all. God bless you. Keep up the battle. Appreciate it very much.
You're watching the Illinois Channel, an independent nonprofit corporation formed to provide gavel-to-gavel coverage of Illinois state government and other public affairs events taking place across Illinois.